Someone suggests that when we make our yearly pledge, when you get a pledge card, that instead of just selecting the number, you get to divide it up over the things you really want to give it, like some to the foundation, some to my salary, some to this group or that. And I think giving choices is great. And in fact, all people who do fundraising know the more targeted the appeal, the more direct the connection, the more likely you are to give the money. And I would love people to have choices. But here's my problem. No one is excited about the electric bill. And yeah, I gotta pay it. So the challenge is to give people choices that excite them, but not to the point where the stuff that we gotta buy doesn't get any support. We have a lot of orphan expenses. No one is going to volunteer more money for our health insurance as much as you believe that it should be done. We all want to support things. In fact, we have so many groups. The choir supports the music, and the kids and their families support religious education, and that's great, but there's no one out there lobbying for the secretary. You see what I mean? So we should find ways to do that. I'm not sure that I want you, though, to go in and say, I'm going to take my pledge, let's call it $1,000, and I'm going to divide it up. I want you to add on. So we got to find a way to do this. By the way, for those who don't know, when we say pledge, what we mean, if you're not familiar with it, is your estimate of what you're going to give over a year's time. In the fall, we'll be coming to you saying, what do you believe you will be able to give to the church for the year 2014? And I think we can do better at involving, engaging, and inspiring you to take part in that. But dividing it up, I'm not sure about that. Someone is unhappy because apparently checks aren't cashed fast enough and some designated funds don't seem to be available. And I want to say, since I don't know your name, talk to me. I can't fix what I don't know anything about. Talk to me. Find me after church. Let's figure this out. Now, I had several questions, I think, from one person because they came on one sheet. One of them, and here they are in sequence, and this is going to get tricky, and I promise to be very transparent. Someone said that sabbatical leave should be limited to 1 month during the church season, as in the past, or in the summer when fewer people attend, but never in September. He's referring, or she is referring, to my absence last September for 3 Sundays when I was overseas taking a very long walk along Hadrian's Wall. Now, let's back up a step or two. Sabbatical leave is a commonplace in the clergy world, but we're an independent, non-denominational church, so we're kind of not up to snuff with what clergy are going through elsewhere. And it arrives from the notion that chances are, if you're going to be a minister in a church, you're not going to get promoted, you're not going to get a merit raise, so you have to offer some compensation and some help for longevity. And besides, we're kind of like professors with all our degrees and stuff. But the problem here is, in a university, you go on sabbatical and there's still 40 professors left. When I go on sabbatical, there's no minister to do the job, or at least not enough. So that is a real question. So there are really 2 questions here. When should a minister take sabbatical leave, and how much? And you're right, September is a bad month. But then so is October. And November's worse. And, well, December, forget about December. Okay, January through March is okay, provided you go south. And that's often the time clergy do go on sabbatical. But April, no, that's the Easter thing. And May, we have all those celebrations. And then summer, of course, you could take sabbatical leave in summer when you're already on vacation. But wait a minute, sabbatical and vacation, that's like, you can't substitute one for the other. We have work to do around this. But I got to tell you, one of the things I want to tell you here is that clergy life, I like to liken it to 2 things. You can either compare it to being an elected official, kind of like being mayor of a village, or you can compare it to being a parent. In that the skills required to be mayor or a mother cannot be taught. You can't walk in with a card that says you're equipped to do it. You have to learn on the job. Anyone can do them, but very few can do them every day. I tell people it's always easy to preach a sermon. It's preaching one every week for 30 years that's the challenge. Likewise with mothering or with service. Sabbatical leave is a chance to unplug completely. And that's difficult for us clergy. Someone once told me years ago, son, who was an older minister then and I was a younger minister, he says, you're never off duty until you're out of the country. And he's right. So, questioner's point about timing is important, and I won't be away in September again. But we should find a better way. Same questioner wants to know why we had 5 ministers here, even when the church is smaller. And I need to correct not correct, but clarify. My colleague Ruth and Jason Hubbard split a job that was run by one person before, so that we had 3 full-time positions divided over 5 people. So that did give us more people, but we weren't spending more money. Of course, one of the reasons we did that is because I needed to have musical help in e-worship, which is what Jason particularly offered, and especially good help in pastoral care, which is what Ruth offered. And they had other good things, too, that we've enjoyed for the last year. Now, just so you know, we did some research here, and our neighbor ministers, our neighbor churches, are a range. They range from 2 to 7, so we're kind of in the middle. And in the last year or two, when Patrick was our executive minister, that meant we didn't have a business manager. So when you factor in all the business managers with all the clergy, we're really quite comparable. So as of this summer, we will have 3 clergy and David Lee Smith, who serves as our vital part-time minister of visitation. Come and hear him next week, by the way. Same person is concerned that many of our long-term older members have felt slighted. He or she thinks that it's worth eating, quote, a little humble pie to retrieve them. Now, I ponder this question, and I want to make sure there's data in front of you and everyone else. There's a photo directory in my desk that comes from like 2001 or 2002. So I was looking at all the pictures. The first thing I want you to know is that of those hundreds who are no longer here, a really large portion of them died. That's hard to accept, but it's true. I counted 63 people who died from that one directory. I count another 67 funerals I have conducted in addition to those, and others have done those as well. So we've lost a lot simply to the attrition of life. But there are those who are not active, and this includes younger and older members, age and experience both. Some have moved to warmer climes. January can be a little challenging, 40 or 50 years in a row. And it is true that they've also sometimes moved on to a different church. Now, I know this is true because we do a lot of pastoral calling. David and Ruth and Jason and I made over 400 direct visits to people this year. And that's only the direct visits, not the phone calls, not the things we did in our offices, and not what Beyond Sunday did. I'm not even counting what Carol Koister is doing over at Porter Hills. We see a lot of people. I make 5 to 8 visits a month. And so I learned a lot. I knocked on a lot of doors, maintained connections with members, even when they did not indicate they had a problem but were absent. Now, questioner suggests that there are people who are alienated, and of course there are. There always will be. Remember, donkey equals ass equals pastor. I know of 2 who left 1 month after I arrived. I barely had time to get up and running before they figured out what an ass I was. What is hard sometimes to know is why. And even when we know the remedy, it may not be possible. I periodically see a letter from a member who attends very rarely, and he sends a check that he wants to go to the choir. And he attaches a letter to it all the time to say, I want this money to go to the choir because he doesn't want to support, and I'm quoting here, that prancing Malvolio in the pulpit. Now, I expect that short of my leaving, he's not coming back. But I expect that if I left, some of you wouldn't come back. It's a tough bit of algebra, isn't it? So if the questioner or you believes someone needs to repair a relationship and that I can be the one to help repair it, do not hesitate to tell me. I've eaten lots of humble pie. I even cook it now. We have a duty and a desire to make every effort we can to restore relationships that have withered or fractured or unraveled. But it takes two to weave a relationship. And sometimes the remedy may cause another tear someplace else. More than one trusted colleague has told me, you can't please everyone, and trying makes everything worse. Someone finally verged into the spiritual, so I'm saving the fun ones for last. What is my favorite teaching metaphor? Thank you, Patty. She's the only one who signed her questions, so I can give you a shout out. Whether I use them or not, the most powerful metaphor for me spiritually is Paul's metaphor of the body and its members. It's a stroke of genius. In it, I find a symbol of unity in diversity, of belonging and particularity, of purpose in life found in serving others, of the value of every person to do a unique and precious job. Bruce Chilton, professor of New Testament at Bard College, wrote a book called Rabbi Paul. Go read it. It's worth it. Paul is still neurotic, but he is also brilliant. My 5 all-time favorite movies. Well, actually, I don't go to the movies very much. They're loud, expensive, and rarely interesting. Once I realized they really wanted my money just to get profit, I stopped thinking they were really there for my good. That said, I have been affected by movies over the years. It's what they do after all. I can't get to the end of Casablanca without choking up. I was shocked at the end of Easy Rider when I was 16. I'm still shocked. Star Wars was exhilarating, if a little shallow. I went to see 2001: A Space Odyssey 3 times when it came out. Now there's a good movie. I saw A Clockwork Orange twice, and what happened to Malcolm McDowell? I also went to see The Sound of Music at least twice because the mountains were amazing and Liesl was really cute. I was very much engaged by Being John Malkovich, which is a movie that it resembles no other movie I've ever seen. That was interesting and funny. But my all-time personal favorite, which makes it number 6, is Reds, the Jack Reed story of the Bolshevik Revolution with walk-ons by Eugene O'Neill and intercut with interviews of old American communists who remembered the 30s and the 20s. Not that I approve of it, but there was something indelibly real and touching and exciting about that. And besides, as I've told you before, any revolution that can get people to sing in 4-part harmony while they take over the government is my sort of revolution. Patty also wants to know what guides my ethical decision-making. 2 things: the Boy Scout law and the Golden Rule. That's all I can keep in my head. It'll have to do. And she asked, and this is the last question, what have you been thinking about sermon-wise lately? Well, aren't you cheeky? Here's the answer. What needs to be heard, not what I want to say. And how can I find a way to say it? The detective novelist Dashiell Hammett once observed that the most effective writing happens at the other end of the pencil. Think about that. We preachers go into the work because we have something we need to say, but we only become good preachers when we learn to listen for what people need to hear. That's a lifetime discipline. We don't always get it right. Note that I said not what people want to hear, but what people need to hear. They may be the same thing. They may even overlap. Sometimes they are completely separate. And every Sunday, Patty, is a guess. An out and out, I have no idea if this is going to work guess. And when people say, do you believe in God? I says, I don't know, but I know some sermons that were great I had nothing to do with. Something is at work in the world that saves me from my own stupidity every week. In the end, we preachers do our best when we make room for the powers larger than ourselves by being honest, brave, and kind. And that's why I end this sermon with the words with which I have begun most of my sermons in recent years, a reminder to myself and you of all that is present in the room that is beyond my capacity. May these words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be found true in thy sight, thou who art my rock and my Redeemer.